back to June 2nd after a heartbreaking loss the Mets had to the Arizona Diamondbacks. Jake Diekman allows a go-ahead home run to Ketel Marte, and the Mets, they're 24 and 35, 11 games under 500, and you go back to some of those episodes we were recording around that time. The series before that, it was the one against the Dodgers where they get swept, and the glove is thrown into the stands, and all that stuff is going on, and we said the season is kind of dictating itself. This is the direction it looks like the Mets are going in, and they said it was kind of a transition year. Maybe no one thought they were going to be perhaps 11 games under 500 at that time, but that's just how things had gone. You also think about the game against the Giants where they had that lead in the eighth inning and it gets away from them, and you just had so many games like that early in the season, and we had the discussions about what could they get for a Pete Alonso, a Sean Manaea, Luis Severino, JD Martinez, any player on an expiring contract. Those were the conversations we were having, on this show, and it was also bantered about on the social media as well during that time. And then, some things start to happen. Uh, Jose Iglesias is called up around that time. A trip to London happens. You win a wild game against the Phillies there, a rare 2-3 double play. You return back to the States, and there's a walk-off home run against the Marlins, a sweep of the Padres, and now you're kind of creeping up the standings there. You're still under 500, but the Mets are creeping up, and it really took a series probably with the Yankees for me, sweeping that Subway Series to get to 500. When you kind of started to say, and maybe it was before that too, because the grimace stuff was happening and whatnot. But that Yankee series to me, when they swept it, I said to myself, maybe they do have a chance to get back to this thing. We'll see. The field hadn't really separated itself, despite the fact that the Mets were, 7 games under 500 around that time, a couple weeks beforehand. They were still only 3.5 out, a reasonable number. But you looked at it and you said, well, there's a lot of teams in front of them they have to jump. The Cubs, the Cardinals, the Giants at that time. Um, and, it was a tough hill to climb, whether, you believed in that they could do it or not. Some probably didn't. I was skeptical myself that they could make that climb. But the Mets did make that climb. They climbed themselves out of a gigantic hole they put themselves in. They put themselves in a position where they could go out and acquire a Jesse Winker, a Paul Blackburn to give him a couple starts. Obviously, you'd like more. A Huskar Brazaban, who did maybe had his ups and downs, but there were times he gave the Mets solid outings. A Ryan Stanek, a Phil Maton. That's probably the big one there. Um, and now the New York Mets have propelled themselves into the postseason after sweeping after splitting a doubleheader today with the Braves, finishing with a record of 89 and 73. The New York Mets got that last wild card spot in the National League. They will head back to Milwaukee for a wild card round series with the Milwaukee Brewers. As we welcome you to episode number 45 of the Queen's Connection, a production of Patton Sports Creative. I am your host, Andrew Patton, not joined by my co-host, Corney Hogavina, as he is still vacationing in Asia at this moment. But no, he is very excited about what's happening going on. He is very happy with this New York Mets ball club, as am I, as every Mets fan should be. An incredible job by this team. Hats off to Carlos Mendoza, David Stearns, Steve Cohen, everyone in this organization, the players. I mean, I talked about it in my little opening statement there, but what a job by this team. I mean, I used that June 2nd date because that was the low water mark of the year, 11 games under 500. Um, but I was at that game against the Arizona Diamondbacks. Uh, Seeing Ketel Marte hit that 2-run homer in the ninth off Jake Diekman. Paul Sewall coming in, having a pretty easy go of it in that ninth inning to close it out for the Diamondbacks. And just thinking, it's a shame. They did say it was a transition year, but obviously, they had some talent on this club. And it all starts with Francisco Lindor, and for a good month and a half, he maybe had some bad luck at times. The same thing with Brandon Nimmo. Obviously, we know Pete Alonso is a big power hitter. Jeff McNeil was having a down year at that time. Um, it's just amazing, where this team came from. A totally unexpected run. Had the best record in the major leagues, during that time. It's quite unbelievable. You also think about that 0-5 start. They just couldn't get anything going offensively, and we're on the verge of going 0-6 until a Pete Alonso home run ties the game. Tyrone Taylor walks it off to get them that first win of the year, and then they go on a little nice run in April, but then things start to fall apart. Uh, and like I said, they hit that low watermark of 11 games under 500, and who would have thought? Who could have seen this coming? I mean, not if you raise your hand if you thought this was going to happen. And I don't think there's a whole lot of people raising their hands as I say that, because, like I said, that we were having the discussions just as your WFAN talk shows were. People on Twitter, Facebook, talking about what can the Mets get for Pete Alonso on an expiring contract. The JD Martinez, Luis Severino, Sean Manaea, guys took who bet on themselves this year. With these essential 1 year deals. I know Manaea is a player option, but obviously he's not picking that up after the year he had. Um, it's just quite unbelievable. As I record this episode after the second game of the doubleheader, which the Mets did unfortunately lose, and we'll probably talk about that first game as well because that was something, something. I mean, that was just a crazy game. But the end result of this 2024 regular season, because the 2024 season is not over, is that the New York Mets got that final wild card spot. They are going to Milwaukee to play the Milwaukee Brewers in a wild card series. And no, I was talking to Cornet on our chat. Um, and I kind of told him the same thing I've kind of mentioned a little bit here. You know, uh, the fact that they made it. Um, I you can rest your head easy. For however the playoffs transpire. Obviously, there's not a Met fan in the world except maybe one, but I think you know what I'm talking about. That doesn't want to see this team continue this magical run and end it with the third World Series in franchise history. Um, but just the fact that they made the playoffs from where they were, I mean, I'm gonna take that and just run with it. Like I said, we want them to beat Milwaukee. We want them to beat whoever they play in the NLDS if they make it that far. The NLCS if they make it that far. The World Series if they make it that far. But when you're in this new era of Mets baseball with Carlos Mendoza as the bench boss and David Stearns running the front office, you really want to have something to build on. And even if the Mets had a down year, like it looked like they were going to have, there was still some pieces there for the future. Obviously, with Lindor and Nimmo, Francisco Alvarez, Mark Vientos, another guy I should have mentioned off the top about, just these unbelievable seasons. But to do this in year one of this, uh, front office and leadership on the field, it don't underestimate that. It's gonna, it's a building block, and the teams or players, I should say, uh, should and will take notice of that. How high profile free agents, who that could be hitting the market. They might look at that Mets team and see what's been going on over there, and obviously, and at the end of the day, the money's going to talk. eh, you know, but maybe that does play a little bit of a factor into decision making and stuff. Now, whether the Mets make this big postseason run, like some people have compared them to the 2019 Washington Nationals, remains to be seen. We'll find out very, very soon. Um, less than 24 hours when Game One of the wild card round is underway. But it's just an unbelievable, you know, task that they had, and they completed. As the 2024 New York Mets are heading to the postseason, and I also like to point that Cornet made as well when I mentioned that, just being very happy that they got this far, and if they get bounced to Milwaukee, obviously we'll be disappointed. Who wouldn't be? Um, but you can kind of smile and sit back and think about, man, that was a really incredible run that they went on, and it gets you excited for next year too. But he also, the point he's making is, 2022 making the playoffs. It was almost kind of expected, much like 2023. The expectations were to make the playoffs. And maybe more those 2 years as well, make a deep postseason run, and obviously that didn't happen. With 22. Um, getting bounced by Arizona, getting bounced by the Padres in the wild card round. Um, and then 2023 just pretty much once Edwin Diaz hurt himself in the WBC, it just kind of felt like, man, this train might be coming off the tracks a little bit, and it did, and it resulted in some players getting moved. Um, but this year, like we've talked about a little bit already, it was dubbed the transition year. So you're not really sure what to expect. They could make maybe they could sneak in a wild card. Get 84 wins and sneak in like the Diamondbacks did the year before. Maybe they'll kind of have a similar record to 2023, but you move some guys and you get some more prospects to beef up the farm system. We didn't really know what 2024 had in store for this team, and you know to have this be the end result, I'm just over the moon about it. I'm so excited about what's gonna happen with this team, not just in the next couple of days in the wild card round, but moving forward. I'm curious to see what this run maybe catapults the Mets to in the next couple of years. And obviously they couldn't get this far, or they couldn't reach this playoffs, clinch this playoff berth without winning at least one game in Atlanta today. And that first game, an 8-7 Mets win, you're kind of not feeling maybe too great just because Spencer Schwellenbach is starting for the Braves, and we know how dominant Schwellenbach has been against the Mets this year. I mean, just less than a week ago, shut them down, and he pretty much did the same thing for 7 innings today. And the Mets fell into a 3-0 hole when the game started by Tyler McGill. And I didn't think McGill pitched terribly. 8 strikeouts in 5 2/3. Unfortunately, he got bit by the long ball. A couple soft hits, but he was able to get out of some jams. Um, no real tip of the cap to Tyler McGill. Uh, hadn't pitched in a while. That last start against the Phillies Sunday Night Baseball. So just a little over a week ago. And he comes out and he did his job for the Mets. Unfortunately for the Mets offense, for the first 7 innings, they weren't really doing theirs. They had some chances with runners on base, couldn't capitalize. The Braves get up 3-0 with Schwellenbach dealing. Um, you're not feeling too good about your chances to win that first game, and then all of a sudden, it's all starts with Tyrone Taylor, and what a pickup Tyrone Taylor was by David Stern. Someone he obviously had some familiarity with. I know maybe not the flashiest numbers, uh, but the guy is a ball player, and he's gotten some really big hits for the Mets down the stretch. And there's no doubt in my mind, I'm sure we'll discuss a little bit about the roster construction for the wild card round. But there's no doubt in my mind he's got to be your starting center fielder. Curious to see how they utilize Marte. Can he play 3 straight days if it goes 3? Can he? What's that going to look like? But one way or another, Tyrone Taylor is going to be in that lineup patrolling the outfield for the New York Mets in the postseason. And it just sparks something. Alvarez gets a hit, drives in a run. Marte comes off the bench to hit for Bader, gets a hit. Lindor gets a hit, drive in a run. Iglesias, they just kept it moving, and then you look up and man, they got a 4-3 lead, and Brandon Nimmo hits a 2-run home run. Now you're up 6-3. You're feeling pretty good, to be honest. I know it's the Atlanta Braves on the other side, but you got to feel pretty good. I know I was. And then eventually the Braves Score four in the bottom of the eighth. Maton, 3 straight days, you could maybe question a little bit of that decision there. And then you go to Edwin Diaz, and he could get out of it. He just forgets to cover first base, and then all of a sudden Ozzy Albies clears the bases, and the Braves have a lead, and you're thinking, oh, now they got to win game two. And then the MVP, the Mets MVP, unfortunately, probably not going to be the National League MVP, but the Mets MVP, the leader of this team, the guy who should be the captain, comes through with a big hit, a 2-run homer to get the Mets an 8-7 lead. I mean, it's unbelievable, Francisco Lindor, what's happened really since that Phillies series in Philadelphia. All the missed time, working his way back, and to get that big hit, the biggest hit of the season, one of the biggest home runs in the franchise's history. And they said on the broadcast, and I don't disagree. Is he going to propel himself now over Jose Reyes as the best shortstop in the franchise's history? He might. He might have. That's to be discussed. But Lindor getting that hit puts the Mets in front, and Edwin Diaz coming back out and getting the final 3 outs. The tying run did get to second base, and Travis d'Arnaud comes up with 2 outs, and you're thinking, oh, d'Arnaud. Why does it have to be d'Arnaud? It didn't have to be d'Arnaud because he grounds out to who else but Lindor. The 6-3 put out to end the game, to seal the deal. The Mets heading to the postseason. I mean, what a game. No, definitely had the emotions. All the emotions were all over the place in that game. The anxiety was high from the first pitch till the final out. And the Mets had clinched that postseason spot. They have that X next to their names in the standings, signifying they are going to the postseason. Quite unbelievable. And I mean, definitely a game that not a whole lot of people are ever going to forget. And to do it in that ballpark against that team, it's huge. And I know you could look at it and say, well, the Mets, including that game last Tuesday, they lost 2 or 3 to the Braves. But you know what? They only needed to win one. And they did that. They did exactly that. And to do it the way they did with that against that ball club in that ballpark, like I mentioned, it just made it even sweeter. So a sweet, sweet 8-7 win to put themselves in the postseason. Not too much to talk about in the second game, a 3-0 loss. But a tip of the cap to Joey Lucchesi, who got called up to make this start. Hadn't pitched in almost 2 weeks. His last start for Syracuse was, I believe, back on the 18th. I looked it up. So he's going on almost 2 weeks of not making a start. And he comes out and he throws 6 innings of 1-run ball. You got to tip your cap to Joey Lucchesi. That's a hell of a job on his part. So great, kudos to him. Great job. Obviously, it would have been fun for the Mets to win that second game because then instead of heading to San Diego, the Braves would be setting up their tee times. But the Atlanta Braves are a good ball club, despite some of the injuries that they've had. It's still a good ball club. You never feel good about facing the Braves. So, the Braves, with that win, punched their ticket to the postseason. Like I said, they're heading to San Diego. The Mets are heading to Milwaukee, as we all know. And wow, that's really all I can say is wow. I'm watching the celebration right now, the clubhouse, and it's something. It really is. You just go back to the first couple minutes of the show, just thinking about where this team was and where they're at right now. It's unbelievable. Um, and now we have a postseason to talk about. It's exciting. It's very exciting. Um, but it does present some challenges because, as we saw, maybe the Milwaukee Brewers are not the most impressive team, star power wise, but it's a very good ball club. The Mets saw that. They got guys that can hit the ball in the ballpark. They got some guys with some speed that are pesky players, I think is a good word to use. So this Milwaukee team is not going to be an easy out. They have incredibly good pitching, especially the bullpen. And obviously, with the Mets winning that first game of the doubleheader, they didn't have to use Luis Severino in that second game. Now they can pitch him for game one tomorrow. You're going to have Sean Manaea on regular rest for a game two. And if it goes game three, it's probably going to be a Jose Quintana outing, just based on the schedule with the rest and whatnot. but the way Quintana's pitched of late, we don't maybe necessarily feel as bad compared to where we did in the season. I mean, I've been a critic of Quintana. Cornet has at times as well, but he believed a little bit more in the track record than I did. Um, and Quintana just had a really good month of September, so maybe you don't necessarily feel as bad about him getting a crucial Game 3 start if it gets that far. Um, but obviously, the Brewers, Freddie Peralta is going to take the guy. He's got to take the ball for them Game 1, and we know how good he is. I mean, maybe after that it gets a little dicey starter wise, but that bullpen is so good for the Milwaukee Brewers. So, I mean, yeah, if Frankie Montas starts Game 2 for him and he only goes 4 innings, the game is certainly not over by any means. Just because he got knocked out in the fourth inning, or they decided to take him out in the fourth inning, this Brewers bullpen is so good. Um, so the Mets are going to have their challenges offensively in this series, no doubt about that. So some guys are going to definitely have to step up. Um, hopefully some guys can carry some momentum over. Francisco Lindor, the day he had, can he carry some of that over? Brandon Nimmo's big home run, maybe that gets him going for the postseason. But the Mets are really going to need some guys like Alonso uh, to come through when the moment calls for it. And if that happens, then I think the Mets have a decent chance. If they pitch well, no two, then that's really going to help them out. And I think something that we saw too in that series, this past weekend with the Brewers, and they made the point on the broadcast as well on the Saturday one. John Smoltz on the national broadcast. Get a lead early against the Brewers. Make them fight their way back. Um, if the Mets can do that, that's just going to really help their chances to maybe shock the world, if you could say. I don't know how big of a shock it would be, but they're definitely got to be the underdogs coming into this series. No question about that. Um, and now, how you construct your roster is going to be interesting. Like they made the point, Eddie Alvarez, he's not eligible for the postseason. So he's unfortunately not going to be a part of that roster. That's kind of like a Terrence Gore-esque player, that, as we've seen. But Luis Angel Acuna's definitely got to be a part of it, especially with Eddie Alvarez not being eligible. How do you utilize your bullpen? Brazoban and Ottavino pitched both games of the doubleheader. Does that mean they're not going to be on the roster? Do you have a David Peterson in the bullpen for you? I have to think Tyler McGill's probably not going to be on that roster throwing 100 pitches on no, today. Probably not going to be available. I wouldn't think anyway, but those are questions that David Stearns and Carlos Mendoza, I'm sure they're going over as they're clearing the champagne from their eyes. They got a flight to think about this. So, um, it'll be very interesting to see what transpires. And something else that was interesting I saw on Twitter. I don't remember who tweeted it, but Brett Beatty was in the clubhouse celebrating with the guys, and we know Beatty came back uh, from his fracture in AAA. So, is he eligible for the playoffs? I feel like I should know this, but I'm just looking at the fact that the Mets have clinched the playoff spot on my laptop, and it's I'm a little distracted maybe. But if Brett Beatty is indeed eligible for that playoff roster, do you put him on if he's healthy enough? It's something interesting if that is a discussion to be had. So whatever, and we'll find out in the morning what the roster setup is going to be. But um, wow, I mean, I'm just at a loss for words. I mean, what a year, what a team. Um, yeah, it's quite unbelievable where this team came from when it looked like they were going to be sellers, and now they're an 89 win ball club that's going to the postseason. It's quite unbelievable, and what a journey it's been for them. What a journey it's been for us on this show. Our first episode was right after that Tigers series. Um, in those first 6 games were not overly impressive. We're 45 episodes in, and we got a postseason to talk about. Um, it's unbelievable. It really truly is, and I'm excited to see what happens. Like I said, obviously we want the Mets to beat the Milwaukee Brewers. We want them to continue their season, but to get this far from where they were, it's I've said it, it's unbelievable. Um, and despite what happens, you can't hang your head on this season. It's truly been one of the more crazier seasons, roller coaster seasons I think I've experienced as watching the Mets for almost 20 years now. It's something. It's crazy, but the craziness is going to continue at least for another couple days as the Mets try to win two more games and punch their ticket to the National League Divisional Series. But they're going to have to do it in Milwaukee against a very tough Milwaukee Brewers team. And I think we're just going to wrap things up here for episode number 45 of the Queen's Connection. Thank you so much for listening. Make sure to follow us on social media at Twitter and Facebook. Just search the Queen's Connection. We'll pop up there. Make sure to like and subscribe wherever you listen. Spotify, YouTube. Hopefully we got some more playoff themed episodes coming. We thank you so much for listening. And what a year, like I said. I know I've repeated myself with that, but what a year. It's not over yet, but it's been truly a magical, magical season for the New York Mets. We will never, ever forget the 2024 New York Mets, and hopefully they give us some more things to remember as they get ready to face the Milwaukee Brewers in the National League Divisional Series. So we hope you enjoyed the series, and we will talk to you very, very soon. Let's go Mets.